This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Tonight, I'm tackling a topic that every teacher has wrestled with: predicting grades. It's a tricky balance between ambition and realism, between motivating students and managing expectations. Do we aim to high and push them to succeed, or play it safe and avoid disappointment? And how do these predictions shape everything from UCAS to classroom teaching? So let's break it all down.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Well, good evening and welcome to the Late Late Show with me, Chris Wilkinson. I hope you're all doing well on this fine spring day. I think it's been a lovely day. It's probably the nicest day of the year so far. And of course, we've all been chained to our classrooms, of course. I got out at lunchtime, so it was quite nice actually to get out and have a bit of sunshine. So it was lovely. Now, I am still here, no baby just yet, so we're all good to go for the time being. And tonight we're diving into something that's always been a bit of a hot topic. And not so much at this time of the year, it's more so around the January time, but it's still a hot topic, especially if you're a teacher in GCSE and you're doing this for students who are applying for sixth form. And of course, this is predicting grades. Now, whether you're a teacher making all those important grade predictions, or if you're perhaps a parent who is wondering what all the fuss is about, or you may well be a student who's listening to this and realizing, how it works. Well, the point is, if you are in that category, this show is certainly for you. And it's all about making sure it's right. Now, as an A-level teacher, I have to do these predictions throughout the course of the year. We have a grade point prediction in the first term, and then the second term, then of course the end prediction just in time for the real exams. And really, for a particular student in my class or in an A-level class, it doesn't start then. It starts actually before they even begin A-levels, because when they come for an interview at the sixth form, one of the first things we ask is, what is your predicted grade? Because if they're wanting to do a subject that has a more selective criteria, like, say, for example, biology, and they need grade sixes in their sciences and their English and maths, then we need to know in advance what they're predicted to achieve so that we can put them on the correct pathway for A-levels at the time. But as I am predominantly A-level, I'm not going to focus so much on GCSE predictions tonight, but of course, when I'm talking about my predictions, naturally, if you are a teacher who teaches at GCSE and you have to give GCSE predictions, then of course this will apply to you as well. It's the same strategy, isn't it? It's just a different level. So it all starts the same way. And what I'd like to discuss tonight is, first of all, I'd like to start with UCAS predictions, because they're a different beast altogether, aren't they? I mean, what we predict a student for UCAS may well be different to what we predict if our management team's asking for a prediction. And really, because with UCAS we're trying to aim up, but when it comes to predictions with management particularly, you don't want to aim too high, because you could very much bite yourself on the backside with that. So in some instances we predict up, and in some instances we predict down, and it's very, very strange that in both of them occasions we're probably slightly hedging our bets a little bit. So let's start with UCAS predictions. This is always a tricky one, because on the one hand, we want to be aspirational to our students, and we want them to aim high and have the chance to get into their dream university, or certainly their first choice university. But on the other hand, we don't want to set them up for disappointment, or worse, send them into an exam season with an unrealistic expectation that could lead to stress and burnout. And that unrealistic expectation is it's really important that we don't set that expectation too high, in order to make sure that they don't think that they are going to achieve higher than what it is that they're capable of. And I did a whole discussion last week around A levels and sometimes setting expectations and capabilities, and knowing that revision strategies need to be adjusted because of that. And what I'll do later on in this particular show is have a quick discussion around how predictions can then inform revision practice as well. So that'll sort of feature later on. But predicted grades hold significant weight in university applications. They can determine not only which universities consider a student's application, but also whether they receive conditional offers that set them on the pathway to their future career. Now, as teachers, we feel the weight of this responsibility. We're not just making a guess, we are making a statement about the student's potential. And a prediction isn't a guess. I know it is, but it isn't as well. It's, we might predict a football score because we want our team to win. So I'll say, oh, my team's going to win 2-1 at the weekend. And we're being more hopeful than anything else. But we're not professional footballs. We like to think we're professional football fans sometimes, but we're not. But we are professional teachers. So we're not making a guess. We are making an informed judgment and a statement about their potential. So the difficulty is that potential isn't always easy to quantify, because some students are late bloomers. In a 2-year A-level course, we've certainly seen that over the years, suddenly finding their stride in the final months before their exams, while others might have peaked earlier in the year. So what's the balance when you're predicting in January of the second year? Well, it's about being realistic, but giving students that fighting chance. And if a student is sitting comfortably on a B, but is really pushing for an A, then predicting an A could be the push they need to work that little bit harder. And we always say, if we're going to predict, it should be if the questions go well on the day, if they have their Weetabix on the morning, of course, so their breakfasts are available, and do they have the wind in their sails on the morning? And if they do, are they likely to get an A? Then, of course, the answer would be yes in that instance. So you would be predicting that A in that instance. But of course, it could be that confidence boost that they need. And that confidence boost might be the key to unlocking their best performance. And some students work like that, don't they? But if a student has never achieved above a C in their life, predicting an A is certainly more of a fantasy than a forecast. And let's be honest, universities know this. They're not looking for, not just looking at predicted grades, they're looking at the whole application, personal statements and references. And our job then is to be aspirational but not reckless. A well thought out prediction should give students the motivation to aim higher while remaining grounded in what they have already demonstrated that they can achieve. Now, of course, every student has their own approach. Some will say, let's go one grade above their current level, and let's prove them right. But others prefer a best of 3 approach, and we do see a bit of this, don't we? So looking at the highest grades achieved in the mocks and the class assessments, others take a trajectory approach, assessing whether a student is on an upward curve and factoring in their work ethic and their response to feedback. Whatever method you use, consistency across the department is key. And, we see this all the time in the sixth form. And as a UCAS referee, me and my colleagues who are also UCAS referees, we will be going around. If you've got 20 in our tutor group, we'll be asking them 20 tutors, can you give me a prediction, please? And we know that they might need, say, 3 Bs. One teacher just happily obliges and says, yep, they could get a B, so therefore I'm predicting a B. And that's not always the right approach, but in a way, as a tutor, it's kind of easier, really, just to go, yep, no problem. But some will not predict a B, and they will say, no, they've only ever achieved a C. And that's that best of 3 approach, isn't it, where we sort of look at the highest grade and say, right, that's where we're going with this. And of course, mock exams, and I've done a whole show on mock exams in the past as well. Mock exams are a real reflection, if only you make it a real reflection. So the questions have to be synonymous with what you get in the exam, picking and choosing questions that they might be able to answer based on what they've done so far. is not necessarily it could be the best approach to see where they are, of course, but it's not the best approach to find out if you're basing your prediction on that strategy, then it's not necessarily the best approach, is it? Because they may well do higher or lower on that, depending on the degree of difficulty in which you've set it. So, whatever method you use anyway, whether that's the trajectory approach, the best of three, or whatever approach you do decide to use, consistency, like I said, has to be key. And I think really it could well be that a CPD prior to predictions could be set up in institutions just to say to people, right, okay, we're going to go with this approach. And of course, you will get teachers who have an individual approach, and they will not refuse, of course, but they will, they will take umbrage to the fact that they can't predict it the way that they want to, and that will be a challenge, of course. But what I'm saying as a UCAS referee, as a UCAS tutor, that we do need a standardized approach across the college or the school, and we have that. We're excellent in my school, so there's definitely no question there. But I do know that when I've been to CPDs on this particular issue, that there is a wholesale problem with places not being as consistent. So a student doesn't quite get the service that they need from their tutors. And, because of course you don't want to teach inflating grades or ones being ultra cautious, that just creates unnecessary stress, confusion, and particularly when students compare predictions amongst themselves, which of course they inevitably do. Now, as a teacher, I've often found myself in a position of asking colleagues to strike a balance when it comes to UCAS predictions. And while we all want to set them standards, sometimes there's a tendency to underpredict, and I think we're being cautious because they're being cautious or realistic. And like I said, we have a very good approach now in the sixth form, and we tend not to struggle too much with that. But I do remember in the past we have struggled with getting consistency, and I do remember one particular case where a student was, despite showing tremendous improvement and consistently achieving high marks in class, was predicted lower than expected. And it was a bit awkward to have that conversation with a colleague, because I think they believe that you're questioning their professional integrity, or maybe not integrity, but their professional judgment. And that isn't the case, is it? We're not saying that. We're just sort of making the point as UCAS referees that we do need a student to be fairly consistent. In that regard. I mean, obviously, if they're particularly underperforming in one subject, but this wasn't the case, and just one teacher was being particularly cautious, and as a result of this, their application to a competitive university was at risk. And after discussing with the teacher and staff, we agreed that while predictions should be fair, we also need to trust in the students' growth and achievement over time. And actually, in truth, we're not held to them predictions, are we? I mean, if a student underachieves, then that's on them for their underachievement. We fully believe at the time that they were capable of that. And we've got to give students the opportunity, where realistic, to get into that university of their choice. And after adjusting the prediction, the student was eventually accepted into that university. And it was a powerful reminder that while caution is important, we need to ensure that our predictions give students the best shot at achieving their aspirations. There's also an ethical aspect to predictions as well. If we inflate them too much, we risk giving students that false hope, which leads to devastating rejections on results day and increased pressure to get in through clearing. And if we are too conservative, we could be shutting doors on opportunities. So the balance really has to be struck, and it's of course really difficult to do that, isn't it? But of course, however we're being consistent with this, transparency is also very important, and students need to understand that predicted grades are not guarantees, and they are informed estimates. They should be seen as a benchmark for their goals, not an entitlement or a limitation. So ultimately, I think UCAS predictions are more than just a reflection of past performances. They're an opportunity to show a student's potential and give them the best chance at reaching their higher education goals. It's essentially crucial to ensuring that they achieve the chances that they can, really. And it's crucial that we work together to ensure that we're striking that right balance. acknowledging their past achievements while still looking forward, really, to everything that they're possibly capable of getting in the end. So by making thoughtful, well evidenced predictions, we can help students navigate this crucial stage with confidence, clarity, and a real sense of purpose.
Meet 2025 BET Award winner Kialo EDU, the 100% free tool for thoughtful, inclusive classroom discussion. On Kialo, students contribute instantly and simultaneously to create an interactive map of a discussion, deepening their subject knowledge and enhancing their critical thinking skills. Set tasks, track participation, and provide personalized feedback in just a few clicks. And since it's compatible with all your favorite LMS platforms, it slots seamlessly into your existing workflow. Over 1 million educators and students are already using Kialo to make the world a more thoughtful place. Join them today at kialo-edu.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Welcome back to the Late Late Show with me, Chris Wilkinson. Now, we were looking just before the break at the UCAS predictions and how tricky it is to navigate the UCAS predictions throughout the period of September really to January. And what we've said is that the main thing to focus on when looking at predictions is that as a centre, we just need to be consistent. And consistency and transparency is key in order to give students the opportunity for the best chance at achieving their first choice university. Now, as an alternative to UCAS predictions, we've also got predictions from a management angle. Now, if you're a department head or a member of SLT, or just someone who's been in meetings about grade predictions for whatever reason, you'll just know how much this data carries, how much weight this data carries for us. And especially when it comes to A-level in particular, because the A-level results are just so unpredictable. And as much as we can predict, ultimately, we don't know what goes on for them 3 hours or 4 hours collectively in an exam. They maybe have 2 hours for one exam, 2 hours for another, 2 hours for another. We don't know what they are doing in them 2 hours. Ultimately, they could be having the absolute day of their lives, or they could be having a really bad day at the office. And so ultimately, we can plan and project throughout the course of the year, but it might come down to, well, it does come down to them 1 or 2 hours in the actual exam itself. So we are really, we struggle sometimes, don't we, to make sure that we've got it. And quite frankly, the predictions can be, as we said, they can be wrong. But predictions do feed into performance measures. Now, for schools, that could be league tables, but mainly it's about intervention strategies, isn't it? And in many ways, we're more interested in the students that require them intervention strategies than the ones who will just simply get the A's. And them intervention strategies are so important, aren't they? So in many ways, predicted grades don't just affect individual students, they influence how entire schools and colleges are perceived, whether that's by SLT, by Ofsted, by parents, and of course by prospective students as well. But mainly it's from within. It's more internal predicted grades, isn't it? So throughout the course of the year, are we on course to achieve what is the expectation? And a department's predictions can shape decision making at the highest levels, from curriculum planning to resource allocation. And when I say resource allocation, the first thing I can think of straight away is the allocation of support staff for those who require the interventions. Now, it's really important from a management point of view that we understand who them students are, who requires the intervention. And we can only really say who requires them interventions by giving a prediction that certain students will not achieve the grades that they want. And quite frankly, at A levels, more AS first year, some of them students will not pass. And we have to really be clear who these students are. Rather than knowing who's going to get the A's, it's more important who isn't going to get the E's, basically. Now, the challenge here, again, is not over-predicting, because if we were to over-predict, we may be setting false expectations. Again, not necessarily for the students this time, because they may never know what their predicted grades are. We might give them a target grade, but we're not necessarily disclosing to them what their predicted grade is going to be. Of course, if they ask, we can inform them, but from an official point of view, it's more for the expectations that are setting for the management, and making sure that we don't set up any false expectations, and making sure that we're not under predicting, so that so that unnecessary interventions are put in place. Because if we're predicting, if we think, oh, this student's going to get a D, but I'm going to put down an E, because if they get a D, it's going to make me look better. I'm not saying staff do that, because of course all teachers have integrity in that regard. So I wouldn't say that's why they underpredict. It might be that they underpredict because they're being cautious, and of course that's a realistic thing, because as humans we tend to err on the side of caution, especially when we're talking about other people, aren't we? So especially students, of course. But if we do underpredict, then we're putting unnecessary interventions in place when we might not need to. Now, the interventions do feed in and segue into what we were talking about last week with regards to revision strategies. Now, the revision strategies are, of course, going to be very much affected by who we predict in the E's and the U's and such. So it's very important we do that. So, but also for the middle of the road students as well. So if a student who's regularly hitting a B but gets a C prediction, might suddenly find themselves in intervention sessions or intervention strategies that they don't necessarily need. So this could have an impact on motivation, because after all, students want to feel that their efforts are being recognised, and they want to be, of course, challenged. And we can't be challenging a student who, if we're giving them a strategy that they can already technically achieve. And being placed in an intervention group is based on an overly cautious prediction, can be demoralising. And of course, on the flip side, a student who's scraping through with a prediction of a D, but has predicted B, might be overlooked for the support that they actually need. If you want to say, oh, all my students are going to pass, but there's an actual legitimate resource available to the students who need it, then they're going to be overlooked for that, aren't they? And it's really, of course, it's absolutely not right that that's the case. So sometimes we have to be on the nose with these predictions, because it's in the best interest of everyone, the students, and of course the management staff who are supporting you as well. Because if my manager, they're going to back me if I'm saying these are the grades that I think they're going to get, then they're going to go into meetings and they're going to back me and say, yep, I trust my staff. And of course, you want to have that trust, don't you? So you don't want to be given the wrong grades, obviously. And if we inflate predictions too much, like I said, we're risking the run of it, which could really mean the difference between them securing perhaps a university place or falling short when exam results day arrives. And it is entirely possible that that's the case. I can't say off the top of my head that that's ever really happened in my situation. Maybe I've been lucky that my predictions have been okay. But of course, if you've got incidences where that's happened, please let us know, because love to hear follow-ups from this, and as a fallout from this as well. But of course, it's a balancing act, and you don't have to think about the bad day at the office scenario. If a student has a great track record but occasionally doesn't turn up for an assessment, how do you predict it based on their best performance or their most typical one? And honestly, either is feasible, isn't it, really? And what about students who are just inconsistent? The ones flying 1 minute course and the next. And then do you predict based on their potential or their actual performance? And honestly, what do you do? I I mean, that is just an open question. What do you do? What does one do? Well, the temptation is always to err on the side of optimism, but this has to be balanced with a firm grounding in the data that you have in front of you. And we have to consider factors like mock exam performance, coursework trends, and work ethic, rather than just relying purely on their gut feeling. But often the gut feelings can't be wrong, can they? And I think from a leadership perspective, consistency across departments is just so key. And if one subject area is consistently over-predicted while one is played it too safe, then this obviously creates discrepancies, doesn't it? And it can lead to difficult conversations with students, parents, and even university admissions teams. But of course, sometimes it can be varied because subjects are different. I was talking to my colleague today who teaches sociology, and I've got a student we share a student in my politics class, and they just pulls apart in what they're achieving. So it does happen, of course it does, and if that's the case, then we have to predict based on our things. But sometimes it does come down to the fact that teaching personalities leads to differences in how they predict as well. And ideally, we would love to see a more standardized approach, wouldn't we? Whether it's using students' most recent assessments, so we're all doing that, but of course making sure that all of our assessments are as rigorous as possible. Their best performance, which again would be positive for all of us, but may lead to inflation as well, or a 3 assessment average. But again, this 3 assessment averages may not be the best option if one assessment was done easier than another. I mean, my last mock exam, I gave my students a full paper, like a full paper. I didn't pick and choose which questions they should do. I just gave them last year's paper and said, off you go. Whereas in other subjects, they may not have done that for many reasons. Maybe the students weren't ready or whatever. But of course, however they're assessing, you could still do the best average, couldn't you, across all of the subjects? And these discussions could help iron out any inconsistencies and ensure that staff are aligned in their approach to predictions. And at the end of the day, grade forecasting at a school level needs to be honest, data-driven, and of course, more than anything else, fair. It should be a process that evolves throughout the academic year rather than just a one-off decision made in isolation. And most importantly, it needs to be reviewed. Predictions aren't and can't be set in stone. If a student suddenly has a breakthrough moment and starts smashing their essays, that should be reflected. Likewise, if someone starts struggling, we need to catch it early, adjust accordingly, and then predict. So sometimes interventions are so important when it comes to this, because interventions might be needed before we even start to do predictions. And this means maintaining clear communications with students about their predicted grades. Not just as one-time conversations, but ongoing dialogues. And of course, this applies back to the point about management. The ongoing dialogue should also be with management too. I mean, what really helps in my department is that my manager also teaches the same subject as me. So we've in the past had the same students, and we can have an open dialogue about how they've progress from where they are, or if they're still stagnant in their progress, and it's really helpful having that. And most middle managers in education do still teach, and what's really helpful is that it really helps, because when you're trying to explain your predictions to the managers, they know that, and quite often they know the student as well. So it's really helpful having that sort of open dialogue with management in order to do that. And of course, because they back you and trust you, the management will then go into meetings and they'll speak on your behalf, and most of the time I presume do a fantastic job as a result. So it's really helpful having that dialogue, isn't it? And it's important that students and parents understand why they predicted grades, and that dialogue between the parents should then be reported in the reporting programs. For us, it's ProMonitor, but whatever reporting systems you have, them conversations should be very open and again recorded, so that anybody at any level in the management chain can see why the predictions have been made the way they are. Because too often predictions are often seen as a final verdict as well, and it's like a document. It's like the scheme of learning, or it's like a tracker that you have for your students. They're living and breathing documents. So if your progress is living and breathing, then predictions should be living and breathing as well. And too often these aren't, and the final verdicts are what they are, and there's no reason why we can't change them at a later point if that reflects on the progress that they made. And obviously it helps students to encourage them to take ownership of their predicted grades by setting targets, tracking their own performance, and making the process feel more constructive. And that could be relayed back lovely to management through the reporting systems, because these are the intervention strategies that they're looking for. So if the students are predicted the lower grades, and ultimately, while predictions are never an exact science, and they can't be an exact science, because of the very nature of human nature, people change, attitudes change, and such. The goal is to provide an accurate and supportive roadmap for students, one that both challenges and reassures them and prepares them for the exams and their future beyond school.
Meet 2025 BET Award winner Kialo EDU, the 100% free tool for thoughtful, inclusive classroom discussion. On Kialo, students contribute instantly and simultaneously to create an interactive map of a discussion, deepening their subject knowledge and enhancing their critical thinking skills. Set tasks, track participation, and provide personalized feedback in just a few clicks. And since it's compatible with all your favorite LMS platforms, it slots seamlessly into your existing workflow. Over 1 million educators and students are already using Kialo to make the world a more thoughtful place. Join them today at kialo-edu.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Website covers comments by Ofsted Chief Inspector Sir Martin Oliver as he accused the most vocal critics of the proposed reforms to inspection. He said proposed report cards for schools are not and never were going to bring about the end of grading. In a speech to the Association of School and College Leaders annual conference in Liverpool, Sir Martin said giving parents and families the information they need in a clear and accessible way was a must-have. Head teachers in the audience at the conference laughed when Sir Martin said he did not want them to be doing anything for Ofsted. Last month, Ofsted launched a consultation on its plans to introduce a new report card system for grading schools in England. Under the proposal, schools could be graded across a variety of areas using a colour-coded 5-point scale. The scale would range from causing a concern to exemplary. Education unions have criticised the proposals for being even worse than the current system. Sir Martin said the report cards were never going to sacrifice much needed clarity for parents. He also said that anyone who thought that report cards were going to end assessment was mistaken, and they weren't paying close enough attention to what parents want, politicians promised, and what children deserve. Ofsted has faced increased criticism since the death of head teacher Ruth Perry. The government announced last year that headline Ofsted grades for overall effectiveness would be scrapped. In response, the president of ASCL, a serving head teacher, said the new report card system felt like a kick in the teeth. Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson also told the conference that she knew the proposed changes were challenging and that they sparked debate, but that it was an important national conversation. She went on to say that Ofsted were putting out genuine consultations on the changes. Full details, comments and responses from the sector can be found online. The BBC News website features the issue of emotional literacy amongst men and boys. The charity Beyond Equality, which works with young men on tackling issues around violence against women and girls and the topic of masculinity, had been spoken about by them on BBC Radio London. Ben Hurst from the charity says he believes there is a real systemic issue across the UK with how boys and men have been socialised to move through and experience the world. He said, they manifest in a range of different ways, and lots of ways are wildly inappropriate. He told the BBC Radio London team that the work of Beyond Equality was to have conversations with men and boys before violent or abusive situations arise, and to try and address gender equality through the lens of masculinity, with an approach that asks questions like, what is masculinity? How does that feel? Do we like it? And would we change it if we could? The BBC programme followed the sentencing of Hassan Sentamu, convicted of the murder of a 15-year-old girl in September 2023. Schools Week features an exclusive report on CEO pay and the rises which it says have sparked inflationary spirals in some of the biggest spending trusts. In its annual executive pay investigation, data has shown more than 60 trusts had leaders paid at least £200,000 last year, with 95% of them awarded rises. National Governance Association Deputy CEO Sam Henson said salary benchmarking is in some cases leading to inflationary spirals, and they don't come with an accompanying narrative on how this deals with the massive pressures the sector is under. The article goes on to say that the gap is widening between CEOs and the rest in the highest paying trusts. 19 of the 31 highest paid chief executives saw the gap grow. A full table of CEO pay can be found on the Schools Week website. Top of the table is Harris Federation, with their CEO being England's best paid and the first to cross the £500,000 threshold. Sharon O'Ryan of Payne Education said there was usually a strong positive linear correlation between CEO pay and pupil numbers, but this is predominantly in the early phases of trust growth. And that it flattens to a maximum salary for the job regardless of size. 22% of the highest earners are women, similar to last year's 23%. But a Confederation of Schools Trust Pay survey found women CEOs earn about £8,600 less than men, although the gap did narrow slightly. Full details of all the facts and figures, including some details of falling salaries, can be found on the Schools Week website. This has been Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Welcome back to the Late Late Show with me, Chris Wilkinson, and tonight we're talking about predictions, and we've looked so far at how predictions can vary between UCAS references and your predictions that you may give to management as well. Now, this is where I link it back to last week's episode on differentiated revision techniques, because predictions don't just impact students and management and data and whatever else, they also shape the way we teach as well. And in many ways, predicted grades aren't just an administrative necessity. They serve as a roadmap for how we approach our lessons, structure our interventions, and support our students in the lead up to exams. And of course, if we had a group full of students who predicted A's, we would have a very different approach to those who were all failing. So if you think about it, you're predicting a class full of A and B grades, the intervention strategies will look very different from a class where most students are hovering around D's, E's, maybe even U's. And predictions help us to decide where to put our energy. Are we focusing extension tasks and stretching challenges activities? Or are we looking at revisiting core knowledge and plugging gaps? Now, of course, some students will be high achieving, some may not be. And of course, we could do all three of them things, but we may do it in differentiated ways in the classroom. And I don't necessarily mean to say differentiating our teaching, because of course, when we deliver the content, we do teach to the top and scaffold those who need it. But when we talk about revision and making sure that students are achieving their target grades, then of course we have to differentiate our learning, like we said last week. And the only way to understand how to differentiate our revision and how to make sure we understand what the targets are is by being able to give them prediction in the first place. Now, a high achieving class may benefit from activities that encourage deeper critical thinking, such as debates, synoptic questions, and unseen material that pushes them beyond the specification. Meanwhile, a class with students working towards passing grades might need more structured revision, retrieval practice, and a focus on exam technique to secure those crucial marks. Now, one of the biggest mistakes we can make is predicting grades and then just leaving them on a static number. Predictions should inform predictions, should I say? Predictions should inform planning. If you know that, say, 5 students in your class need to jump a grade to secure their next steps, that should impact your teaching strategy. Are they struggling with exam technique? Do they need more structured feedback? Are there gaps in their subject knowledge? These aren't just questions for management meetings or for UCAS admissions tutors. They should be part of our daily practice in the classroom. It's about targeted intervention, not just for management purposes or for data purposes or for administrative purposes with the UCAS admissions tutors, but actually for actual learning. And this is where differentiated revision techniques come in. Some students need constant reassurance, need explicit guidance on how to approach exam questions, and others just need a confidence boost. One-size-fits-all revision sessions just simply won't cut it. And they don't cut it, do they? So again, how do we decide how to inform our planning? Well, we need a baseline as to where students are. And how do we establish that baseline? By giving them predictions. And unlike UCAS, where we may be predicting up, and unlike for management, where we may hedge our bet a little bit in case we end up with egg on our face at the end of the exams, really to inform our planning, this is the prediction that needs to be on the nose. This is the prediction that needs to be absolutely spot on. And the only way we can achieve or we can avoid that one-size-fits-all revision is knowing who needs what and when. And of course, predictions will always do that. And the more we tailor our revision strategies to the individual needs of our students, and we can adapt to their needs, the more likely we are to see that meaningful process. Now, for example, students who struggle with confidence might benefit from low-stakes quizzes and incremental challenges to help them build their belief in their abilities. And those who struggle with structuring their responses might need guided essay planning sessions, both of which can be done in the same session if we differentiated our revision effectively. And others might need more time practicing there under time conditions to improve their exam technique. And the point is, predictions should help us identify what students need rather than just serving an abstract number that sits on a spreadsheet somewhere on some system. And that is why it's so important that predictions are reviewed regularly. If a student is making significant progress, our interventions should shift accordingly. Likewise, if a student is starting to struggle, we need to be proactive in adjusting our approach. It is easy to see predictions as a one-off task, and when your management 3 times a year say stick your predictions in the spreadsheet, you can see that as a one-off task, and it can be quite daunting. But in reality, they should be a living, breathing part of our teaching process. And ultimately, predictions just aren't about reporting. They should drive meaningful teaching decisions. By linking them to our classroom strategies and differentiated revision techniques, we can ensure that they serve the real purpose, which is really to helping students achieving the best of their ability.
Meet 2025 BET Award winner Kialo EDU, the 100% free tool for thoughtful, inclusive classroom discussion. On Kialo, students contribute instantly and simultaneously to create an interactive map of a discussion, deepening their subject knowledge and enhancing their critical thinking skills. Set tasks, track participation, and provide personalized feedback in just a few clicks. And since it's compatible with all your favorite LMS platforms, it slots seamlessly into your existing workflow. Over 1 million educators and students are already using Kialo to make the world a more thoughtful place. Join them today at kialo-edu.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Meet 2025.
Welcome back to the Late Late Show with me, Chris Wilkinson. And I thought I'd just take this little moment now just to give you a little bit of a update as to how the Late Late Show will appear in the next couple of weeks and months. And the likelihood is that I won't have a show in the next 2 weeks because in 2 weeks' time, our baby will be born, and with any luck, then everything will be great and grand. So it may be a couple of weeks before I appear on the Late Late Show again. But what I am hoping to do in the forthcoming shows in a couple of months' time, in a couple of weeks' time, is to start taking a look at why it is so important that as a teacher we are at some point in our career, whether that be at the start or whether it be throughout the middle of it, to do the very thing that we are aiming towards for our students. So for me, it would be being an examiner to understand the exam practice. But of course, it may well be that you're not teaching exams, but as a teacher, you may be teaching apprenticeships, or you may be teaching, level 3 applied subjects, which requires a lot of coursework, for example, and in which case my advice would be to be a moderator and whatever else as well. And from my experience as being an examiner, I just want to do a show that really explores the benefits of being an examiner and understanding that when you're giving a mark, whether it be a mock exam or even for homework, that you are given that mark because that is the mark that you will receive in the exam. Not because you've read a mark scheme and that mark scheme you interpret it to meaning a certain way. The only way to really understand a mark scheme is by being in that discussion with other examiners when that mark scheme is being standardized. And there's nothing quite like it for an examiner or a teacher. And really when you are doing, or when you are marking them assessments and results, your ability to identify the students that need the level of work where you can predict them, the predictions go up no end as well, because you know on a regular basis who's achieving that as well. And because ultimately when you look at the mark scheme does not give you anywhere near the levels that you need to understand quite what the exam board's asking for. And my advice would be always to do that. And even if you just did one year, because it is a big commitment on a year-to-year basis, it's essentially, for me, the whole of June just goes because of it. And it's the worst time of year because the weather's lush and, the people are out there having fun, and your exam, because the exams are starting, your subjects are winding down as well. So as you stop teaching, you start examining, you think, yeah, right, I'm not doing that. And I can totally understand why it is that people don't want to do that. But ultimately, I don't think there is a replacement like it being an examiner. And it brings me back to the original point tonight of being able to predict, and being an examiner or being a moderator. You can't, you can't ask for a better practice. There's no CPD like it for you being able to predict grades. So, based on what we've pretty much been saying tonight, predicting grades is not just about putting a number in a box, and sometimes it is. Let's be honest. If your boss says to you, your manager says to you, "I want these predictions by I don't know the 31st. What date is it? The 31st of March." You just do it because you asked for it, and that's fine. So sometimes it is actually just putting a number in a box, isn't it? Or a letter in a box. But really, to get to the point where you are putting that letter in the box, it's about doing a lot of things before you actually input that data. And the one thing that would say is it's about getting the balance right between aspiration and realism for UCAS applications, but it's ensuring a fair and useful forecasting for management. Because if you've got a first year group and the management saying to you, what is the predictions for your 10 students that you've got in politics, ultimately the management team have every right to know how many are going to be progressing to next year. In fact, it's not only do they have the right, it's fundamental that you provide them with that information, because it could affect what classroom you get put in. It could affect how many hours you get as a team. It's so important that you get that right. So they've got every right to ask that. And quite frankly, I think it's the most important question they can ask of you: how well are your students going to do? And using these predictions really shapes, of course, how we teach. And that third point tonight about shaping how we teach really segues into my show that I did last week about differentiated revision. And as teachers, we're not fortune tellers, but we do have that responsibility to guide students in the right direction. And predictions should be a tool and really not a trap. And I think it's a really good point to say that they shouldn't be predictions. They should be predictions, but they shouldn't be a trap. They should inspire students to push themselves while also giving them an honest reflection of where they are and where they could be. And the best predictions act as a motivation rather than a limitation, and giving students something to work towards rather than something that holds them back. And this isn't just about individual students. At a broader level, predictions help us refine our teaching approaches, allocate resources effectively, and ensure that our interventions actually meet the needs of those in our classrooms. So whether it's stretching high achievers, supporting students at risk of underperformance, or simply making our revision strategies more targeted, grade predictions, when done well, can be a powerful tool for progress. And ultimately, the way we approach predictions says a lot about our teaching philosophy. Are we empowering students to reach their full potential? Are we being fair, honest, and consistent? And most importantly, are we using these predictions to make better decisions, whether that's in guiding students' next steps, shaping an intervention strategy, or refining our own teaching methods? It is a delicate balance, but we need to get it right. And when we get it right, it makes a real big difference. So that is all for me tonight for the Thursday Late Late Show, and I am really, really grateful for your support in listening to this podcast. And I really hope that anything that we've discussed you would like to do moving forward. And if there are any questions or if there are any follow-ups from this and you would like at some point to maybe discuss this in the future, or if you would like to be a guest on my show, it's always something that I'm looking for. My Twitter handle is Chris_W1987. That's Chris_W1987. And I would love to hear from you if you would like to appear as a guest on my show, whether it's to discuss predictions, revision strategies, or whether you want to discuss something completely different from your experiences in the classroom. I would absolutely love to hear from you. And I will hear from you very, very shortly. And if you are on LinkedIn, my name is Chris Wilkinson, and you will find me as an open. It's an open account, so you should find me quite quickly. If you'd like to connect or make any contact through a message, please feel free to, and I would love to have you on the show moving forward. And as I said, it will be a couple of weeks before I'm probably back on. It may even be towards the end of April, maybe the beginning of May, before I get into routine with a second baby. My God. And, by then we should be in a routine and I can commence with the late shows again. So between now and maybe the beginning of May, mid-May, I may not be around, but I would love very much. I'll still be about on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and I'd love to have any conversations with anybody who'd like to, because my passion's teaching and learning, and if your passion's teaching and learning, let's get together and talk it out.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.